Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Cody Ann Smith and today we're talking all about soul loss. So, I actually experienced a soul loss when I was about 19 or 20. I started feeling part of me going away. It was disappearing. And it was so weird because it was very abstract. So it's not like I physically seen it with my eyes, but I could see a part of me going away. It was like it was drifting away from me. And it was the strangest feeling ever. And I didn't know back then what it was. I just knew that a part of me was missing, and it was kind of fading away. And so today I want to talk to you guys about this because I think that it's a lot more common than a lot of us realize. That soul loss is actually probably one of the biggest reasons why we have so much healing on this planet to be doing right now. So, soul loss is basically fragmentation. It's basically where your consciousness splits off and hides parts of yourself. So part of you gets hidden into this different, I don't know, the shamans believe that the parts of our soul that were leaving us were going to different dimensions and different realities and different realms. So parts of your consciousness are splitting off of the whole, and they're kind of like just going away for a while. They're kind of like in hibernation, you know, so they're not gone, but we don't know how to access them because we feel so lost when we don't have our soul intact. Okay. So, for me, this felt like a fog coming over, like a veil being put over my face. And like this feeling of walking around like on autopilot, going through the motions of life and not feeling inside of myself anymore. I wasn't feeling like I was living inside of my body. I felt like I was living externally, but I didn't know how to bring it back. And so you don't feel embodied. When you are going through soul loss, you're not feeling like you're all the way in your body. And it has a lot to do with being grounded as well. And for some highly sensitives and empaths and light workers, you know, we naturally have this tendency to feel like we don't belong here. In this 3D realm, we might have always felt a little bit different. So parts of us might naturally kind of do this, but in order for us to manifest anything in this world, we've got to be embodied, and we have to have that life force inside of us, that soul inside of us, for us to really bring things from the spiritual world into the physical world and to feel whole and healed and like we are all of who we are, instead of feeling like there's pieces of us that's missing. Okay? So when we're not embodied, we're always looking outside of ourselves. We're looking outside at how other people are reacting to us. We're looking at the external as validation for reality, but it's because we're not embodied. We feel like we can't create from that deeper place, deep down, because we are missing a part of us or parts of us. Okay? So it's like your life force is in hibernation. So a lot of what I noticed with me, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, is that sparkle that was once in your eyes, this is just one physical symptom that can happen, but the sparkle that was once in your eyes might be gone. And you might notice that your eyes are looking more dull and like they don't have that life in them. And I remember before this happened to me, before soul loss actually happened to me, I was the type of person who could walk into a room and magnetize the room because I had so much life force energy inside of me. And I remember people would tell me that, Codi, when I look in your eyes, there's just something about you. And what it was my life force energy. Because so many people are naturally walking around with pieces of them missing, that they're just attracted to that life force because so many don't have it. And they're looking for that piece of themselves in other people. So when they see that life force in somebody else, they know that there's a part of their self that's missing, and they're wanting to bring that back to them. So that's one way that you can really tell if you're experiencing this, is that you feel disconnected, you feel like a piece of you is missing, and you lost that life force. You lost that life force inside of you. You might not feel embodied. You might feel that you live outside of yourself or on autopilot. And so for me, it felt like being checked out. I would constantly refer to this as being checked out. And this is back when I didn't even know what it really was, you know, because when I was 19 or 20, that was like 11 years ago, you know, or actually longer. So, you know, I didn't know back then what all of this actually was and what was happening, but I would always refer to feeling checked out, like I was checked out of my consciousness. And I was right, but I didn't understand it. And now I hope that this video is going to serve its purpose to help the people who might be stuck in this place right now, so that you can start to integrate that part of you, call your soul back to you in multiple different ways. Really embodying that creative power that each one of us has inside. Because that's what we're here for, is to create. And so when we are experiencing this soul loss, we feel like we have this void, right? Like there's a void inside of us because there's a part of us that's not there anymore. And so it's like an empty space, or like we know something should be there, but it's not. And so sometimes what can happen is that, like in my case, you look towards external stimulation, you look towards the external world, the external thrills, and getting that adrenaline rush because it makes you feel alive. It's kind of like the placebo to actually being embodied in your body, because you get that rush of energy and then it makes you feel alive, but deep down you feel empty because you don't feel like you are all intact. You feel like there's that void inside of you, part of you that's missing, and it can lead you to addictions and creating behaviors that you wouldn't normally act on if you felt like you were embodied and you were in your power. So, you know, we're more prone to external BS or external belief systems. Isn't that funny how belief systems, if you shorten it down, it's BS, because it kind of is, you know, especially when we're listening to everybody else's belief systems and not tuning in to ourselves to make sure that they're legit for us. But we're more prone to listening to the external world. We're more prone to listening to the people who tell us who we are instead of who we know we are, because we have that piece of us that's missing. When we have that soul loss, there's that piece of us that's missing, and we're more prone to the opinions of others and to buying into different belief systems that are total BS, you know? And what that can set us up for is, again, looking externally and then not feeling whole inside. So everything that we want to create, we're not really creating. We're in our minds a lot, and we're projecting our consciousness outside of us because we're not embodied. So here's I'm going to give you guys some ideas, or not ideas, but examples of what you might be experiencing if you're experiencing this soul loss that I just explained. So there's physical symptoms, and then there's psychological symptoms. And if you look into to psychology and how they explain these types of things, what I'm talking about, the soul loss that I'm referring to, they are actually talking about disassociation, which is where you're like split off, just like basically what I was just talking about, except for it's more in a psychological viewpoint, and they don't fully, I don't feel like they fully know how to treat this, because they prescribe pills and things like that, and it's really a soul, it's a soul issue, versus something that a pill just can't fix. You know, it's about integrating those parts of you again instead of looking externally. And that's the problem, is that we're always looking externally. So you might feel tired and depressed, anxious all the time. You might feel like you are always on edge, or that you're always tense, that you're just like, you feel like there's impending doom, that there's always something that's going to happen that's wrong. And you have this anxiousness inside of you. That can be one huge sign of having a missing part of you, because you feel anxious, because you don't feel whole. When you feel whole, you don't feel that way. You don't feel anxious, and you don't feel depressed, because you have that life force inside of you, and you realize that life is beautiful. But when you have those pieces that are missing, you look externally to fill those voids. And so you might get anxious about things. You might feel empty. You might feel like there's a piece of you that's missing, or that you're not connected to your emotions, or you don't feel connected in general. You don't feel grounded in your body and in this world. You might have angry outbursts and temper tantrums, where you feel like you can't control your anger. And you might be suffering from codependency, where you think you need somebody else in your life to meet your needs for you, because there's a piece of you that's missing. And you're not meeting your own needs because you're so focused externally trying to get your needs met. You might deal with low self-worth and low self-esteem, because you don't really know who you are. Or you know who you are, but it seems so far away. It seems like it's not embodied. It feels like the part of you, the you, the real you, the true, authentic you, is so far away from where you're at right now. And so you might feel this low self-esteem, that you're not good enough, or that you are unworthy of your desires, and that type of thing. Some people, they fall into narcissism when they're experiencing soul loss, because again, what's narcissism? They're trying to get a need met externally, you know, and they're the most disconnected from their source, which is our soul. When we're not connected to our soul and our source, it's like a starving child looking for that fix, that food, right? It's like a starving child looking for something to eat, and they'll do anything in the world to get it, you know? So some other things that you might be experiencing with this soul loss is you might have problems remembering certain things. You might have problems remembering certain times of your life, or remembering even a day ago, because you're in that dissociation, that autopilot, that spaciness where you're checked out of your consciousness and you're not embodied. And so when we're not embodied, we have a hard time remembering things, because we're not processing things in the same way. We're processing things in a very different way, in a very superficial way, where we're not bringing our emotions into us and really feeling into those emotions and understanding from those emotions. So the less that we do that, the less that we can create those memories. Our consciousness is split off of that. when you're split off, you might also notice that you feel emotionally numb. If you feel like you can't even feel feelings, it's a huge sign that you're experiencing soul loss, where you just feel numb to the world, and no matter what somebody says or does for you, you still feel that way. You know, I experienced that. I experienced time lapses in my consciousness too. A lot of them, actually. And, you know, retrieving those memories are, you know, I don't think that you necessarily have to retrieve the memories as much as you need to step into that healing for yourself and start to actively co-create your life. Because the more that you start to focus in the correct direction, in the direction of growth and expansion and love, the more your soul is going to start coming back to you. I don't think you necessarily have to go back and experience all of those things. Now, the shamans, I think they take you back to and experience the moment. But I think that we've evolved past having to do that. And now there's more ways to retrieve your soul versus having to re-experience the trauma. So again, you may feel like parts of you are missing, or that you have these feelings of anxiety that seem to just plague you all the time. And I was just talking about retrieving the soul. And when you retrieve the soul, you don't have to necessarily re-experience the trauma. You can actually retrieve your soul by just calling your soul back in, by creating that safe place again, and really stepping into your power again and calling that back. Because ultimately, we are the creators, and we get to decide these things for ourselves every single day. And it might not be easy because we have created these patterns, but it is totally possible. We just break those energetic bonds of the things that, you know, the conditioning that we've put our bodies through and the things that we've been doing, and we start putting new beliefs and creating new, we replace those from the old to the new, and then we start to call our soul in that way. So you might have dealt with, I have a list of stuff that I wrote down so that I didn't forget anything. But you know, you might deal with a host of problems. You might deal with insomnia. This was me. I used to never go to bed before 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to wake up at 7:30 to get my kids to school, and then I would sleep all day. But you know, in all fairness, I was actually experiencing the dark night of the soul as well. So after my soul loss, this is another thing, is that you can experience the dark night of soul. And so you can experience that existential depression. So that's what the dark night of the soul is that we lose a part of us, and then we realize who we are again, but we feel disconnected from that, and we're not sure how to get that back. And that's when we experience this idea of the dark night of the soul, or this depression. And it's a different depression than just being clinically depressed. It's a depression where you're depressed with existence. You're not sure what your purpose is. You're not really sure why you're even here and what you're here to be doing. And you feel like you have this a huge mission to accomplish, but yet it's so out of reach. It feels trapping. It feels suffocating. And what you can tend to do is you turn to the addictions. You turn to the alcohol or the cigarettes or the weed or whatever it is that you might turn to as a means to fill that void, as a means to escape that feeling of being soulless, of losing your soul. And when you're in that deep, dark night of the soul period, it's tough, you know? So it's kind of like you experience soul loss and then you go through the dark night of the soul. And there's stages to this dark night of soul, but I'll get into that in a different day. But for now, I want you to really understand soul loss from a really practical perspective. And I'm using myself as a reference point because I've experienced it. And so that's all I can really share from is from my own reference point. So what I realized when I wasn't, when I lost part of my soul, was that I was not expressing my truth. I would hold in my true feelings. I wouldn't want to cause any ripples. And I thought that everybody else around me knew what was best for me besides myself. And that just led to more of the problems. You really, when you start to heal from it, when you start to heal from this soul loss, it's like finding yourself again. It's literally like rekindling the relationship with yourself and figuring out what you like again, what you value, what you truly believe, what you love in life. And if you can't get there yet, that's understandable. It's really understandable if, you can't figure out what you love in life right now, because when you get down there far enough, it's really difficult to be able to know what you even love anymore. But this is part of it, is that you get to know these things again. You get to embody all of you again. You start to feel that passion. Remember when you were a little kid and you were like so excited on Christmas morning because you had all these amazing surprises waiting for you? That's what it's kind of like when you bring your soul back into you. It's like, oh, life has all these amazing opportunities that are going to come to you, and you start to feel more energetic and less dense. The more dense we feel, the more, Joe Dispenza would say, the more matter that we become, but the more lighter we become. And when we can express ourselves and bring that life force, that soul back into us, we remember who we are again. It's a journey in remembering who you are again. That's what happens after the soul loss and the dark night of soul. And it's about shedding this false identity that you've built up for yourself. So when we have this soul loss, we create a false self based from our shadows. And we create this as a defense mechanism for who we want the world to be able to see us as, because deep down, we don't really know who we are because a part of us is missing. And so you might hang out with the wrong crowds. You might do things that you wouldn't normally do, but it felt right for the role. It felt right for that false identity to be doing those things, because that was the identity that you chose for yourself. So it's about shedding that false identity. It's about unhooking yourself from these old patterns of being in these old belief systems and letting your true self come back. It's about giving yourself permission to allow this to happen. Because so many times we block ourselves because we get attached to these identities, that if we let go of what has kept us safe for so long, that we are no longer going to be safe anymore. It's like we're letting ourselves be open and vulnerable, which we are, but that's where true healing takes place. And you only get the unknown, and you get miracles and all of that in that place of not knowing everything. But it's about trusting again. You start to trust again. You start to feel whole again. And you start to love yourself and really step into that conscious creation. Because when we're running off of that soul loss, we're not consciously creating anymore. We're creating by default. We're creating that from that false identity. And we're not fully stepping into who we truly are. And then we have all this stuff happen in our lives that we don't want to happen in our lives. And then we wonder, well, what am I doing wrong? And we blame and shame, and that just keeps our soul away. So it's about healing that, It's about loving yourself. And there's really so much more to this. But for the purpose of time, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. And I hope that the information that I gave you was helpful, because I know that when I was going through this, I had no idea what was happening. You know, and then you go through this spiritual awakening or spiritual initiation, and then you might fall into that dark night of soul. And the dark night of soul lasted about a decade for me. It's not necessarily a fun experience, but there's one thing for sure, is that we grow and learn and expand through these tough times, and that nothing ever stays the same. So if you're experiencing this soul loss right now, just know that it's not going to be like this forever. And try not to think about the big picture of it, because it can seem overwhelming. Because it can seem like you have all these different things you need to do and you don't know where to start. And yeah, don't do that to yourself. Just take one day at a time, live as consciously as possible, and create from that future self. That's the ideal self, the next level self, the part of you who is embodied, the part of you whose soul is there. It's there. You have to tap into it. When you tap into it, you're going to notice that you have more periods of those times when you feel embodied and you feel that soul inside of you. And then it might kind of get clouded over again, and then you'll feel it again. But as we heal and become more whole, it's about creating less of the ups and downs, where you feel like your soul is gone and then you feel like your soul is back, and more, it's a more consistence, where you feel like your soul is always inside of you. So we have to create that space to allow our souls to be inside of us. We have to create a space where the soul wants to be there. And we can do that through conscious creation, self-love, self-transformation, and really stepping into our healing. So I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I will talk to you guys on the next one. Have a beautiful day today. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.